So, what is the best use case for these plugins and who do I believe that these are for? So, for me personally, I think the best use case for these plugins is sound design. And this is true to the nature of what they're emulating, which are guitar pedals. When you think about someone who has a guitar and they have a guitar pedal board with all of these different effects pedals on there, they're trying to get different tones and different characters out of their guitar. And if you think about electric guitar as an instrument, it can sound as wild as a distorted guitar, and it can sound on the other side of that like this ambient, dreamy instrument. And all of that is possible because of guitar pedals. Well, in the same way, for me, I love using these Safari pedals as sound design tools. So to give you an example, this is the raw sound that I started with. So as you can hear, it's not very exciting. So what did I do? Well, by using these different Safari plugins and also this wonderful pitch shifter by K Kilohertz, I believe they're called, I was able to get this sound. Now, that is a massive difference. And if you're hearing this, there's a point that I absolutely need to make, which is when you're hearing productions and you're hearing sounds, sometimes you might think to yourself, what presets are they using? What instrument are they using? But most of the time, on the higher levels, they're creating their own sounds. And I think tools like Safari pedals are tools that allow you to create your own sounds, because that's mine. That's Alex Elliott. Other people can try and get a similar thing. And there's that typical trap kind of brass massive hit, but it's not going to sound quite like mine. Why? Because I made my one from scratch. So these tools absolutely help me to achieve that. But let's break this down. Let's see how I managed to get the sound to sound like this. So firstly, I pitch shifted it down because the original sound, if you listen to it, sounds quite thin, quite piercing. It just sounds weak. So to give it more character, more body, more energy, I just pitched that down by 12. And I knew that in doing this, it was going to create certain artifacts. It was not going to retain the top end as much. It was going to kind of make it feel a bit filtered off. But that was exactly what I was after. I mean, it already sounds 9 times better in my personal opinion. So after this, I then added this Rhino verb. Now, this was an absolute accident. When I first engaged this plugin, most of these plugins, they're engaged at 100% wet blend. And I'm so happy that they are, because I probably never would have done this, because have a listen to how much of a difference this is making. This instrument essentially feels like it's emulating some kind of spring reverb. I didn't get into the whole manuals with all of these kind of things because I think there's great YouTubers out there who kind of go into the details and the specifications. But for me, because my mind defaults towards technicality, I find myself having to do things to keep myself creative and to keep myself focusing on sound. So easy way for me to do that is to not even read manuals, but to just play with things, because then I'm able to have happy accidents. I'm able to use it in the wrong way, which ends up being the right way. And I get these really cool creative decisions. So if you're looking for specification breakdowns, this absolutely isn't the YouTube channel for you. But if you're just looking for dope sounds and just creativity, maybe this is the YouTube channel for you. Stick around. Let's see if you like it. So this is adding a lot of tone. This is adding a bit of a springy sponginess. And it's also taken out a lot of that low end, which for me was great because I knew that this sound had to fit within the context of a wider production. And the wider production had a ton of low end in it. So this just made it sit right in the mids. And it also ended up making it feel like something that's old school. And to further that point of it sounding old school, I then added this thing called Time Machine. What it does is it emulates the feeling or the tone of those different errors when you click the different buttons. So if you want something to feel like it's in the 50s, hit 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, so forth. But let me show you an example of this. So firstly, we'll bypass it. So as you can hear, true to those different errors, as sound became more hi-fi, there was more frequency range that was able to be reproduced by the sound systems. So 50s is pretty bandpass sounding. 60s, you get a little bit more top. 70s, you get a little more top, little more bottom. 80s, a little more top, little more bottom, and so forth. You can hear it expanding. But what I love is the relationship between a low pass filter and the stereo field, because actually, I'm not sure if they intentionally did this, but when you go through the different errors, by reducing the high frequency range, it then brings the stereo field in a nice way as well. And then I put it on 60s for this particular sound because I like the way it was just taking off the harsh edge on the top, because I knew I was going to bring back some grit with distortion later. Now, Gorilla Distortion, this was the next in the chain. Have a listen to what this is doing. Yeah, it's absolutely gnarly. Honestly, this thing, distortion's great. It has a tone on it. Now, from what I can hear, if you're hearing the same thing as me, that isn't just a low pass, high pass filter, but it sounds like it's tilting. So as you go further towards the left, it's reducing the highs and boosting the lows. And as you go further towards the right, it's reducing the lows and it's boosting the highs, which comes in handy when you're adding distortion. Sometimes you want to bring the low end back. Sometimes you want to reduce the high end and so forth. Now, after this, I'm adding this owl control. Now, this thing is just great. I don't know what compressors they're emulating, but I'm going to show this to you on vocals later as well. And tonally, this thing is just wonderful. I absolutely love it. I'm using it on the lo-fi setting, but check it out. Mmm. Now, if you're hearing what I'm hearing, can you hear how it's adding the body back into the sound? And for me, that's what makes this thing wonderful. It isn't just the fact that it compresses. In fact, I can use anything to compress. I have so many great compressor plugins, but I love how bold this company's been with their decisions in the sound footprint that each plugin has. They're like, listen, this thing is not going to be a clean compressor. This thing is going to be absolutely gnarly and it's absolutely going to change the tone. And if you're going to use it, it's because you absolutely want that sound. Otherwise, use something else. I just love that boldness because this thing consistently is saving me. I love the way it's bringing the full body back into the sound and just focusing that mid-range right in the middle. Then after this, I just have a EQ just to take out a little bit of the low end. And then this is just a plugin that I use to automate the gain levels. So if I want to have it completely cut to silence and so forth. Now, another point I want to make is when it comes to sound design, it's really important to consider your signal flow, because for a lot of people, you might add your reverb later in the chain rather than adding it earlier on. But listen to the difference this makes when I actually take this reverb and put it at the end rather than at the beginning. And now I'm going to take this and place it earlier in the chain and listen to the difference it makes. And then we're going to place it after again. So you could just hear how all of the energy is gone. And that's an important point to make. When you're considering sound design, where you place things and the order in which you place things has a drastic impact on how that sound sounds. Because when the reverb's first, the time machine filter is now affecting the reverb. The distortion is now affecting the reverb and bringing out all of that ambience and that tone and that grit. So for me, adding energy with the order of your signal chain when it comes to sound design is just as important as the actual plugins that you're using, if not more important. But anyway, let's check this thing out on vocals. So this is how it sounded without any of the Safari pedal plugins on it.
Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear. Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear.
I mean, it's gorgeous. They're gorgeous plugins. I haven't even used that word in so long, but it's the word that just seems applicable at this time. It's tone. I know I'm always talking about tone, but tone is sound and tone is so hard to get right. And they've really just stuck to vintage, lo-fi, reminiscent of the olden days kind of sound. And they've just added that magic to all of their plugins. Because if I take these off,
wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear.
but let's break it down. Let's have a look. What am I doing here exactly? Well, firstly, I'm adding this owl control, this compressor again. And remember I told you that this compressor wasn't a clean compressor, but a bold compressor. And the way it brings out the body, well, listen to the thinness of this vocal when I bypass it.
Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper.
Now listen to when I engage it and pay attention to how much of a difference it makes and what the difference is. Let me know in the comments down below.
Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear.
Pause the video because I don't want to impact you with my opinion, but I want to know what you think. Now, what am I hearing? Body. It's rolling off the top end. In a way, it's kind of de-essing, smoothing it out. It is called smooth. And then it's also just giving it the character that's reminiscent of it being recorded 40, 50, 60 years ago. Just really focusing on that mid-range, which our ears love, and just slamming it in my face. Yeah, anyway. And then after that, I'm breaking the laws of mixing. I am actually adding this reverb directly onto the channel. And it's important to understand why I'm doing this. Most of the time I will add things on send as well. But when I want a vocal to actually sit further back into the mix, I actually want to use the wet dry on the plugin on the channel itself, because it's easier to place something at the back or at the front rather than just placing something in a room or giving the perception of ambience. You can really stick something into a space by just going completely wet, because it's, of course, turning down the dry and turning up the wet and balancing it in that way. So have a listen to what this is doing when it's completely wet.
Like
also part of the reason why I love to add reverb in as well. If a vocal feels too loud, rather than just turning it down, sometimes I'll use the wet dry to blend and control the amount that I want to place it into the depth of field, as opposed to just turning it down. But also when it's on ascend, no matter what you do, that vocal's always going to feel front and forward and in focus. And you just have this perception of space that comes around it. But the vocal's still so focused, especially if it's been recorded well. But when you can do the wet dry blend, I just like the way that you can control the balance there. But this is what the Flamingo Verbs add in. And then after that, I'm adding this Fox Echo. And I'm just using this to just add character.
Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear the love, the love, the love, the love, the love, the love, and whisper in my. Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear the love, the love, the love, the love, the love, the love, and whisper in my. Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear the love, the love, the love, the love, the love, the love, and whisper in my.
I mean, I had no intention of getting that deep into this plugin. I honestly was just going to show you how I'm using it, what I'm doing, but there's something about these plugins that just draws you in and just invites you to just play around and to just mess about. Thankfully, I saved the sound that I actually did have for this track, but you can see how easy it is to just be creative with these plugins. But let's have a listen to all of this in context.
Wonder if you can hold me like you did that night and whisper in my ear the love, the love.
So as you can hear, they're just, tonally, these plugins are wonderful. There's so many use cases that you can use them on for sound design. I think I even use them on hi-hats as well. There's this yak delay, which for me, it's so specific in how it sounds, but it's just so dope. Check this one out as well. I mean, things like that. If you just hear this production in its context, you're thinking, what's that drum sound he's got that's knocking around on the sides? And it's not. It's literally this yak delay has almost become like a percussionist within this production, and it's taken this simple hi-hat and it's turned it into this. Now, and of course, there's a point to be said that, yeah, but you could just get another delay and do the same thing, and you can just get another distortion and do the same thing. You could just get another reverb and do the same thing. But there's something about when one plugin company is providing all of these things, that when you're in a workflow and when you're just speeding through and you just want to be inspired and you want to keep the momentum going, just being able to just be like, okay, I've got my Safari pedals folder. I'm just going to go there and I'm going to chuck some of these things on and I'm just going to play around and I'm going to see what results I get. That just makes it so much fun. Now, another case where I used the Flamingo Verb, honestly, this thing just kept getting used over and over again, was on the strings. The strings I'm using here, the Bohemian Violin by a company called Aver Harmonic. Is that how you say it? But anyway, their strings are absolutely incredible. Check this out. Absolutely wonderful. But this is the string line that I had in this production. Now I'm going to bypass the Flamingo Verb. Now I'm going to engage Flamingo again. And bypass it one more time. So as you can hear, it's taking whatever I loved about those strings and it's just enhancing it. And this reverb's really interesting because it actually has a drive, which is essentially a distortion before the reverb or after the reverb. I'm not sure where it is, but what I know is just it sounds dope and that's all that matters. But I love that this Flamingo Verb on strings just gives them it just gives them so much character, as you can hear on the tail end, versus when I don't have it, it's still lovely, but it just gives it that nature. It just rings off and you just get the emotion or the feeling of strings in a large ambient space, which is absolutely wonderful. And another point to make, as you've noticed, by running Logic in low latency mode, it hasn't actually bypassed these plugins. And that's another thing that's absolutely fantastic because when I'm producing, sometimes I'll add these plugins on because I'm able to just get the feeling. And I'm a firm believer that depending on what effects you have on your instruments whilst you're tracking, whilst you're playing, it completely impacts the way you play and the style in which you play. Like when I don't have the reverb on, I'm much more inclined to like play faster movements. But when the reverb's on, I'm inspired to just play notes where I can hold it out longer. Because you just want to hear that reverb sing. Do you know what I mean? But these plugins, Safari pedals, I absolutely love them. I think they're great. I think they're a fantastic company. They actually had reached out to me if I could review their things. And they were like, we can give you some of our plugins and stuff. And I was like, guys, like I've already bought, I own all your plugins already. So I'm just going to make a video because I think your stuff is dope. And I want to just share with people how amazing it is. I just think they're a great company. And I think their plugins are so cheap, so affordable for what you're getting. I'd already made this whole production using their plugins before they'd reached out, like I said. So there's no harm in me just sharing with you some of the use cases in which I've used them. And if you love them, then check out their website. It's super easy, super intuitive to use. Absolute game changer. So yeah, my name's Alex Elliott. If you like this content, then be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And I look forward to seeing you next time. I just filmed 20 minutes worth of content and I didn't hit record on my screen record because my camera had overheated. So I had to pause. And then when I started talking again, I hadn't hit record. Oh, okay. I'll take a break.